Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. In a profile on today's guest, the New York Times declared Taylor Rooks gets the interviews that go viral. Taylor Rooks is an Emmy Award-nominated sports journalist and one of the brightest talents in sports media. It's easy to see why, as she has built a reputation for asking the bold questions that lead to revelatory conversations with some of sports' biggest stars. Taylor is the host and executive producer of Taylor Rooks X, her interview show for Bleacher Report, and a feature reporter for Amazon's Thursday Night Football. Previously, she worked as a host, reporter, and correspondent for the Big Ten Network and as a sideline reporter for CBS Sports Network. In our conversation today, we talk about the power of showing up fully yourself, how covering the NBA's bubble season changed her career, and what she wants in the next phase of her already incredible career. Here's my conversation with Taylor Rooks. All right, Taylor, you've had an unbelievable career and you're still so young. Do you remember what you wanted to be when you were a kid? Was this it?
It was, but I did not know what it was called. I didn't understand that it was necessarily possible, but I did get the shape of it. My mom, a few months ago, had sent me this video when I was younger. As a kid, I would create these roles for myself, and then I would ask myself the question and then answer it. And so not even really realizing it, I was learning just about exchanges and, getting information. But I'd be a singer or I'd be an actor, and I would smile and ask the question through my teeth, and then I would take on that role and do these fake interviews. So I always knew I wanted to talk to people and ask questions. And as I was a kid, I was that kid that had a billion things to say all the time. And to my parents' credit, they let me talk, which I think is very important. So I always knew what I wanted work to feel like. I just didn't know what exactly it was.
Who were some of the biggest influences on you growing up? I mean, I've read some pretty cool things about your folks.
Yeah, so many, but it definitely begins and ends with my mom and dad. And I was actually just having this conversation with a friend the other day, because as you get older, you realize how much you act like your parents. And you don't see it when you're a kid. When you're a kid, you're kind of like, why do my parents do this? What are they talking about? But now when I'm talking to my mom, I'm like, we think the same way. We have the same mannerisms. I feel like I talk to people the exact same way that my dad does. And so they certainly had major influences in terms of the kind of person that I wanted to be. And then I was also really blessed and really lucky that I would grow up and meet all different types of people. And I feel like I was picking things up from others just growing up without really realizing it. But I can point to the things that I have gotten from my parents. I got, both of their just kind of flavor for life, and just their happiness and their want to meet people and just how outgoing they are. I think that I got also maybe my impatience from my mom, I'm sure. I maybe got the need to always want to go fast and not always feel like I'm being present, from my dad. So definitely good and bad qualities I got from both, but all things that have absolutely shaped me. And they are definitely the two people I would point to in terms of influences for sure.
That's special. That's special. I read an article and I loved the piece that your dad would have you talk about and write you a note every day before he went to work.
Every day. And I have all of them. And this little, it's a Payless shoebox that I would always throw the letters into. That's the thing about my dad. I never felt like I was alone because of my dad. I just always knew that he was watching. I always knew that he was there. I always knew that he had experienced what I was experiencing to some level and had some sort of words of wisdom. And he's just somebody who he was meant to be a dad. He was just meant to love you. And so he always just made me feel like I had somebody on my side. And it was tough love sometimes, but there was always some lesson in it. And he would constantly be reminding me of those lessons. So I'm super thankful just for how present both my parents were, but my dad for sure.
That's a gift. That's so cool. I mean, things like, are you going to lead or are you going to follow? And you said, he made you say, I'm going to lead.
Yeah, he would ask me that, and I would have to say not only that I was going to lead, I would have to tell him what a leader was and why these situations called for it. But he would also be very intentional in telling me there's nothing wrong with being a follower. You just have to decide who you want to be. He's like, there's people that are really good at taking instructions, and the people that are good at that, they are what keeps things going. And there are people that are really good at giving instruction and managing others and understanding personalities. And so what's your strength and what's your weakness, and figure out whichever that thing is and dedicate to that. But it was important for him, I think, for me to always want to lead and not be scared of people.
To know that you could do it and to understand the difference. That's special. And I've heard you say that the NBA draft, it's one of your favorite events to cover because you get to see people achieve their dreams, which, amen. How cool. What would your NBA moment be, right? Like the moment that you realize you're living out your dream.
It's hard for me to answer that, I think, because I really tried to get out of moments or accolades or awards feeling like the goal. Because I think maybe a year ago, I would say winning an Emmy. I would say that's the thing that would make me feel like it was my dream. But now I say, okay, I don't want to get caught up in whether you win or lose, meaning you or your work is meaningful, right? Because it feels like an arbitrary thing that you're tying yourself to. Whereas the draft is a direct result of the work that you put in and taking it to, the next level. So I think maybe for me, that moment would be having having a show that was necessary appointment viewing would make me feel like I reached the level that I wanted to reach. You always want to be checking in with yourself and making sure that literally the work that you're doing today was better than the work that you did the day before or the year before or, whatever the case may be, because it feels like none of this matters if there's no actual growth that you see and things that you can point to say, I was better. And one thing I will say I'm super proud of myself for is any new position that I've had, new venture, new journey, whatever, I do know that I put my best foot forward and did the best that I could in that thing. So whenever that opportunity comes, I feel incredibly confident that it will be me at my best, or at minimum, it will be me doing my absolute best.
You covered the NBA during COVID, right? The bubble season, as it's referred to. And only a handful.
I'm so many things running through my head when you say NBA bubble. I'm like, oh gosh.
Well, and not very many people were in there, media credential wise, right? And you think about all the stuff that was going on in the world then, right? COVID and social justice and mental health and all these. Looking back at that, how career changing at some level was that for you?
I mean it when I say up to this point, I think that was the most career changing, career defining, career growing moment that has ever happened for me. I mean, for a multitude of reasons. One, there were so many eyes on the bubble. You're obviously covering one of the more popular sports that is out there. As you said, pandemic, social justice, and then just basketball. So everything newsworthy is happening in this place. And there's so few of you there. So you feel like this major responsibility to make sure everyone that's not there understands what it's like in this bubble. So I was really pushing myself to tell all the stories that were in there because there wasn't one. There were people that were really missing their families. There are people that were missing their kids. There are people that were missing their kids' birthdays and was sad about it. There's people that didn't do well being isolated. There were some people that thrived in that. There were people trying to kind of grapple with feeling like they weren't out on the front lines protesting and helping people that look like them. So there was not this one monolithic experience in the bubble. So it was nice to really get personal with individual players about how they felt about the world around them and how the world around them was affecting like the world inside of them. And that was something that just pushed me. It made me a better journalist. It made me better at asking questions. I think it made me more empathetic. It just made me really understand that all things are individual. And also, too, it's like, when would you ever be so immersed in the work that you're doing? You know, like I was there for 2 months. The first week that I was there, they told me that I had COVID. So I thought I was going to get kicked out of the bubble. Turns out it was a false positive, thankfully. But there was so much going on. And so it felt like you were working nonstop for 2 straight months. And it just made me better at the job. So I'm really thankful that I was asked to go, that I was able to go, that I was able to write a piece for GQ and vlog about it. It just opened my world in a lot of ways that it wasn't really like before the bubble.
Mm-hmm. What about for you personally? What was that like for you personally?
Now, obviously, it was such a dark time in the world. People were losing loved ones. People were dying. It was a hard time for a lot of people, me included. And so I'm in no way trying to discount that. But when I think about what the bubble was for me specifically, because of everything going around, I tried to look at it as an opportunity. I tried to look at being there as something that was good for me. So there were times that I did feel really lonely and isolated, but I would just wake up the next day and try to put it into the work. I think it was probably the more difficult thing when I was in the bubble, I lost my uncle. And so I had to leave the bubble early to go to the funeral. And so that is what kind of, in some ways, it just tied the bubble back to real life. You know, like we were in this place that was so secluded and we were safe from all the things that we felt like were happening in the world. But when that happened, it's like, oh, there is still this world out there and we're losing people and life is happening. And that brought me back to reality because I had to leave. But the bubble was it was a mix of sadness, but a lot of it really was opportunity.
Mm-hmm. It's a cool mindset shift at some level that you created inside of that, right? To show up and allow yourself to reflect on what was so transformational for you. Was there a moment, Taylor, that you were super proud of, that you reflect back on maybe an interview or a conversation, or was there something that you're just super grateful for that you think was a kind of a linchpin in that journey?
Yeah, 100%. I think about when I was interviewing Fred VanVleet in a scrum after practice, and this was the day after everything happened in Wisconsin. So there was all the protests there, obviously advocating against violence and police brutality. And Fred VanVleet goes in the scrum and he's talking to us, and you can tell as he's speaking that he's incredibly emotional. Tears are in his eyes. It was clearly very hard for him what was going on in America. But everybody's asking these questions like, do you think you're going to play? Like, how is this going to affect the game? What conversations have you had about playing with other players? That's what everyone was focused on. But when it was my turn to ask a question, I just said, I mean, I can see that you're very emotional and that there are tears in your eyes. And I don't know if someone has just asked how you're doing. So I asked him how he's doing, and he goes on this really long, powerful answer about how gun violence has affected his life, how he lost his dad growing up, that he feels like he has survivor's guilt because of the ways that racism and police brutality and violence have affected people that are close to him and all the things that he's seen. And how it's hard for him to be scrolling on his phone and see people that look like him die. He said, and then when you are looking at comments from other people excusing it, it then makes you second guess yourself and like, am I worthy of living? And so like for Fred to be sitting there and saying this to us, but also me knowing, like it was very clear that no one had just asked how he was doing. And it's a really simple question, nothing profound about it. But that was truly the moment where I was like, these are the actual stories. Like, what is it like for you when you're going like back in your hotel room in the bubble? Like, how do you feel? And that was also, I think, kind of a turning point in the sort of questions I was asking and content I was making in the bubble. But that's what I remember the most. And not because it was a good answer, but because I just feel like he was able to feel seen and heard in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted that for him and was happy that happened for him.
Wow, well, and you were being human, right? At the most basic level, you were being human and looking at somebody who was super upset. And what's kind of cool, and you didn't say this, but what comes up for me a little bit is that question felt really obvious to you.
Yes, 100%. And something I have learned as I've continued to grow in the career is a lot of the time, the obvious questions are the one that you should ask. But to some people, it feels so obvious that they don't think that they have to. But the thing that's right in front of you a lot of the time is the thing that's most important. Like the thing that you would ask somebody if this wasn't an interview is usually the question that has to be asked. And outside of that, if you ask someone, how are you? And they give an honest answer about how they are, that a lot of the times is the best question you could ever ask. So you're absolutely right. It was a lesson in ask what's obvious and to not be so focused on the job you think you have to get done that you're missing that obvious question as well.
You prepare so much. What makes an interview successful in your mind?
I think to me, it's two things. It's one, did that person feel seen, heard, and like they could tell their story in a way that was rooted in like genuine curiosity and less about judgment. I want people to come on and think they can be open and not feel attacked or that there's going to be any sort of gotcha moment. I want the revelations to happen through genuine, organic conversation. But I think what's really important to me is not wasting anyone's time. That means my time, that means the person I'm interviewing, and it means the person that's watching. As you know, obviously, that the infamous, Barbara Walters stuff, I want to ask them what the viewer wants to know. So it's successful to me when they reveal something that they haven't before. Because to me, like, that's the point of an interview, is to ask a question that generates real thought, and a lot of the time, like, original thought. So I walk away feeling like it was a success if I learned something or felt something about that person that I hadn't before that interview. And that can be many things. It could be something funny, it could be something serious, it could be something happy, whatever. But it's something new that added like a layer to that human that makes me feel like it was a success.
Have you ever been in a moment and had a question that you felt like was the right next question to ask and didn't go there?
All the time. Literally keeps me up at night. Because something I do that I hate doing, but I think it's beneficial, is rewatching them and saying, I should have asked this. And I will watch the interviews and I have that thought like 10 times an interview. So at this point, I always wonder, will it ever be perfect? Do you ever feel like you asked every exact thing that you wanted to ask? But to answer that question, yes, I think it literally all the time. Like one more follow-up could have given more context. You could have just gotten a better idea of their mindset in a moment. You could have learned more about who was there in the moment, whatever. But I forget to ask questions all the time, and I hate it.
Well, that's the drive, though, that makes you better for the next one and the next one and the next one. And what is your preparation process? Get me inside of that a little bit, because it feels like it's deeper than most.
Yeah, I mean, I try to watch every interview that's available of that person. So from like very, very, very old to the most recent. So I spend a lot of time on YouTube. I will listen to every single podcast that they've done. I will go very far in their social medias. But one thing that I think has helped a lot is I will talk to people that know the person about the person, just to give like a little different insight. But I'm also watching the interviews, not just to see the things that they've talked about, but but to see what they respond to and like what they don't respond to and like what works. Like if it's a good interview, I'm like, well, how did that person get them to talk a lot? What were they talking about? What tactics were they using? So for me, the preparation and research isn't just to get information about that person's life. It's like to get information about how they are in these settings, because that then helps me as well. I also will tweet search the person, because that gives me an idea of what the viewer thinks about the person. And that will then help translate to the interview. Like I remember when I was interviewing Jimmy Butler, it was in a very contentious time in his career. He was in Philly. This was after the infamous, Minnesota incident with the pickup game where everybody was saying he's this mean, bad teammate. And that's what a lot of the tweets were saying. So when I interviewed him, I said, the internet says you're a bully. Are you a bully? And so that takes the heat off me because I'm saying the internet said it.
Right.
But it also just really gives me a really good framework of what people think about the person. So I think preparation is like, it's three different things, right? What does the person think about themselves? What do people that know them think about them? And what do people that don't think about them? And then I hope that the conversation is merging all of those things and maybe finding the truth somewhere in it.
There's a thread of curiosity deeply through your process. Consistent curiosity to uncover what appears to often be a nugget or two. Something in a loving, safe way that you can ask that allows them to open up and share that maybe they haven't before.
Yeah, there's this book I read called Heavy. It's by a writer named Kiese Layman, and it's one of my favorite books. And in it, he talks about his writing process. And he says that his family member would say, a question rooted in curiosity, genuine curiosity, will always be better than any sort of pretty cliche or metaphor because it's a real question. And that when you're writing your questions, you should think about exactly what you're trying to say and start by saying exactly that. And that has helped me too, because when I first started, I would fluff up questions because I would think I had to soften the landing, And the more that you add all this stuff around your questions, I think it gives the person you're interviewing more room to not answer exactly what you're trying to ask them. So the shortest, most to the point question that is rooted in real curiosity tends to get the best answer. So I just think a lot of the time we're tricked into thinking that having a cool question is better than just asking the question. So I try to just ask the question in a way that feels right and respectful and good to me.
What do you think people get wrong about you?
I think number one, there's maybe an idea that everybody just blinked and then all of a sudden I was working, I have been doing this for a really long time. I did my first live national broadcast when I was 19. I was in college. I did the pre-women's NIT for CBS. I was doing that when I was in college as well. I had an internship every single year. I was a paid reporter my sophomore, junior, senior year. I was doing interviews. I was really getting my feet dirty. My senior year, I was doing paid work for Big Ten Network. Then they said I could have a job. That was my first job, 2 years at the Big Ten Network. Then I came to New York. Then I'm doing what I'm doing now. But I think that because the internet, and it seems like just one day someone watched a podcast of mine and said, she's pretty good. People just think it was this overnight thing. But I really have been trying to get this right for a really, really long time. So I would say that. I think another thing people have wrong about me, and this is probably something that just affects all women in journalism, but specifically sports journalism, is believing that the way that you appear or the way that you look is enough for anybody to have a job. There are a lot of people in the world that someone would deem to be good looking or whatever you want to use. You have to be so much more than what you look like to work in any business, but really this business. You have to be knowledgeable. You have to be smart. You have to be organized. You have to be good with people and good to people. It has to be important to you to do things the right way, tell stories the right way. I mean, you know, in a business like this, your reputation is absolutely everything. And these are all the real things that make somebody successful. And I think that for people, which tends to be men, it's easier for them to reduce you to what you look like because it just makes them feel better about why you're there. And that's something that I learned really, really early to not let get to me. But I think that is a very common misconception about women in the business just generally. And I could go on and on, about the fact that it feels like over time men continue to appreciate, but we kind of let women depreciate over time. And all of these things that women have to think about that men don't, that are wholly unfair and unjust and just not right. But that is for sure one that comes to mind. And I would say the third misconception, and this is more so just something that I know people are kind of making their internet jokes when they say it, but there's always this overarching idea that when I do these interviews and I get people to talk about things that they haven't yet, or they reveal something about themselves, the joke is always, oh, they were talking to Taylor, they were embellishing, whatever, whatever. I see this happen with Malika as well. And I think the misconception is that the reason that an interview is good is because the interviewer asked good questions. And those good questions then lent to good answers. It's not like people are sitting in the chair and they get put into some trance and they just say whatever. It's like that is such a ridiculous thing. And
Sure.
I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I see this every single day. Anytime I do an interview, that's the joke that people make. And I don't even think that they realize how much it reduces me, how much it reduces the work. They don't even also realize that they're indirectly taking away my voice because you're making it about everything that isn't the work. So I would say those are probably a few misconceptions. Oh, and also that just because you're photographed with a man does not mean that person is your partner. Those are all the ones that I would say, because that is far and away the most ridiculous one. I'm like, man, you can't go anywhere these days.
Right. Oh my gosh.
So I probably named a few and went on a bit of a rant, but I would say those are the top of mind misconceptions.
I tell you what, I mean, back in the days when I was an agent, there was newspapers that people read, and I used to always tell my players, don't read them. Right? Don't read it. And nowadays it's a little bit more difficult with phones and social media, but
for sure. But I would say too, because I agree with that with the don't reading. What I tell myself all the time and what I know that at this point I have accomplished, people want you to feel a way about yourself when they say and do these things. And you keep that power if you feel nothing. So now I feel nothing. I didn't used to feel nothing. It did used to bother me when these things happen. Mm-hmm. But now I know that if you let it bother you even a little bit, that person is winning in the worst way. So I can see a comment, see a tweet, see a post, see a video, whatever. And I know how little that person is because I felt nothing about it. And it does take time to get there. But once you hit that moment and you realize that both the praise and the not praise are equally insignificant, mm-hmm. you just start to be able to navigate, I think, a bit better. And you feel much better about yourself, the good and the bad too.
What do you think got you to that point that you're able to be a bit of a shield against the good, as you said, the positive in it? What got you there?
Honestly, when I was younger and I would talk to people that were in the business, they would always say oh, it gets better. It gets better. People aren't always going to be like this. You grow, whatever. I stopped caring, honestly, when I realized it does not get better. And I don't mean that to be morbid or negative or anything like that. I mean that because there will always be people that just want to be mean. That is not something that will ever change. And I actually think This is why I always say this. It's important to tell people it doesn't get better, but you get better.
Ooh, that's awesome.
And you can control that. Because what everyone else is saying about you and what you're seeing, never in your life will you be able to control it. So if you are waiting for the moment that it gets better, you'll be waiting forever, you'll be sad forever, and you'll feel helpless forever. So when you focus on how can I take in the information, that's when things start to just open up for you and you feel better. So focus on you getting better. And that's what got me into the space of not really caring about it. I read this book, one of my favorites. I actually think they're adapting it into a movie or a TV show, but it's called The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It's so good. And one thing she says in it, and I always say now, she goes, I don't get mad when the dog barks at the mailman because it's a dog. That's what I expect the dog to do. So I am expecting humans to be humans. I'm expecting the internet to be the internet. And I don't have this expectation of something different. The expectation and standard that I have is one for myself. And that helps me enter into those spaces in a good and positive and healthy way.
You know, great athletes talk about control the controllables. And at some level, that's what you're saying in a way, and which is such an important and powerful thing. Where did your confidence come from?
Honestly, I don't know. I feel like that's something, again, I would say my parents, because every day they said I could do whatever I wanted and I could be whatever I wanted. But even though you hear that, I think that confidence is like, that is something that only like you own, you know? Like even though I always felt secure and I felt capable and all these things, it was like going through life is just kind of what made me confident. And I also think I learned really early that the more confident you were, the more things kind of just worked out for you. Like believing you could do it was half the battle. And knowing that you were really good, I think, was half the battle. Men talk about how good they are at things all the time, and no one bats an eye. LeBron gets to say he's the king, no one cares, right? Like right. You get to talk about your accomplishments and what you're good at all the time if you are a man. It's just, for whatever reason, is how it goes. But I was interviewing Jason Tatum last summer, and we were talking about this time he went to a pro-am, and he was there with LeBron, and he goes, you know, I'm a pretty big deal. I've always thought I was a pretty big deal. And the way that rolled off his tongue so easily, I was genuinely inspired by it because I'm like, well, you know, Jason, you're right. You're a big deal. I mean, great friend of mine. You're a big deal. You're right. But the confidence of which he said it and that he didn't even hesitate, I'm like, women should more often be able to just say what they're good at. Like, so I'm really trying to be more intentional and like just saying like, yeah, I believe I'm a good interviewer. I think that I'm really good at this job. And I think you should also say that you're really good at it because they're running around here saying whatever they want.
Sure.
And we should do that too. So I just always want to feel confident and emboldened. And I want to step into places with people knowing how I feel about myself. Because I think that bleeds into how people treat you too. So confidence is like probably the number one cheat code of all things, for sure.
Well, and I always think, you have to act your way into it. In other words, you have to do things to become confident. Like, I don't think you could sit in a chair and just think your way into it. You've had so many incredible conversations. And at some level, even in that moment when you asked, how are you? And then you got what you got back, and the ability to trust your gut in that moment and change the dynamic in that moment significantly builds confidence.
Absolutely. And you feel it kind of bleeding into them too, you know, which helps that content as well. It helps that interview too. But yeah, I think that all of these are exchanges. And the best thing that I can do is show up as me fully. Because if I do that, you're going to show up as you fully. And like, I was actually talking to a friend the other day, and she was saying, like, do you think confidence is something that you can work on? Or are you just born a confident person? I really am of the belief that you can work on confidence, because it's like, what is being confident to you? I don't think it's like this one size fits all thing, right? Like, for you, is confidence like raising your hand and speaking up? Is confidence maybe questioning something? It's confidence just being there. Is it saying hi to someone that you never spoke to? Like, confidence doesn't mean that you decide that you want to be like the president of the United States, you know? It just means that you want your presence to be felt. And so I think that there are little things that you can always do to just become more comfortable in your skin. And a lot of it too is like asking yourself questions, learning about yourself, being self-aware helps you get into spaces and feel more you. So it absolutely is a thing that you can work on.
Yeah, and you can build it. And to your point, as women, I couldn't agree more. People can tell. They can tell when you believe that you belong there, that you can contribute, all those things.
Yeah, and I also think too, it's like, and I always try to tell women this, like, it is everyone else that is trying to make you feel like you aren't maybe as capable. And I always remember, sorry, I talk about books a lot because I love reading, but
I know you do. I love it.
I read this book called Mad Honey by Jodi Picoult. And in it, she is talking about bees. And she says that, I think it was Aristotle was the first person who said that the largest bee in the group was the king bee. And because of the times they were in, they assumed it was male. They called it a king bee. Even though they knew that this bee laid eggs, it was the king bee. And it wasn't until like the 1600s, it was a woman scientist, I think her name was Jan, who dissected a bee and saw that the bee had ovaries, which then in turn made everybody know that the lead bee is a woman. It's a queen bee. And I say that to say, it isn't that women aren't capable and powerful and driven and smart and all the things, because we are all the things and more. It's just that everybody always tries to tell you that you're not. But we have like literally historically and biologically been everything that we want to be. And so I just don't want the world to be a reason why a woman isn't confident, because the world will try and bring you down, you know? But it's just knowing like you are separate from the opinions of others, and you're separate from what society wants you to be. And that all of that confidence and all of those things, like, they're already in you.
You talk about the things that the world and others try to push on us. How have you navigated your career in a way to ensure that you are never put in a box? Because you've built your career in a little bit of a, with digital and streaming versus sort of the ESPN world, if you will. You don't appear to be somebody that's super comfortable being thrown in a box and chilling there and being named one thing or another. Get me inside of that a little bit.
The honest answer is that I want it all, and I want to do everything. And I want to try everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see what I'm good at, and I want to see what I'm bad at. And those things that I'm bad at, I want to work on. But the only way for me to do that is to say yes and like push the limits of the things that are presented to me. Like, even when I think about when I started my career, journalism looked like one thing. Journalism looked like being the person on the desk, either anchoring a show or moderating a show, whatever. And so I did that. I did that for a little. And it's fun, and I was happy doing it, but I always felt like it wasn't exactly the thing that I wanted. So then I started interviewing people, and I was like, this is the thing that makes me feel good. Like, it makes me feel fulfilled. Like, this feels right. But there weren't really people in sports whose main thing, like their day job, was just interviewing people. It tended to be a bit of a mix of things. But I knew what I wanted to do and be known for was interviewing people and figures in sports. So I was like, what decisions and steps can I take that mold and craft that specifically. And for me, that was starting my own thing, starting my own podcast where I could interview athletes, entertainers, singers, everything. I just wanted to talk to everybody. And then recently I said, okay, I feel like I'm becoming known as like the NBA girl, which is fun. Love the NBA. I want to do it all the time. But I knew that I could be more than just the NBA girl. So when the opportunity came for Thursday Night Football, I jumped at it. I love football. I'm Southern. I wanted to do more things. So now people say, oh, she can do NBA and W, but she can also do football. And then I had a fighter on the show, and people said, oh, do you cover MMA? And I was like, I cover anyone that has something to say. Like, so I don't want to ever be seen as like, she does one thing. I want you to know you can put me in any environment and I'll make it work. And it'll be good work, right? So I've tried to be very intentional with being, multi-hyphenate, but also having multiple interests and having all of those things be available to me. Because journalism has changed. It's not all cookie cutter, stuffy, looks like one thing. Your interest can bleed into your work and your work can bleed into your interests. And it's been very important to me to establish myself as a whole person and not just like a sports personality.
And is that how you filter opportunities that come your way? Does that become the filter?
Yeah, I would say that. But then I also say, okay, what is going to introduce me to a new audience of people? So, like with the Israel Adesanya interview, I'm sure people that are fans of fighting maybe haven't seen my work, 'cause that's not what I did. But then there were so many people that just said, I watched this interview. It was like the best Adesanya interview I'd seen. I'm going to go watch the rest of your work. So it's cool to like get introduced to other audiences. So that guides me. But then also like what will continue to set me up as somebody who is a cultural interviewer, just anybody that wants to talk. And because my main goal when I would hope in maybe 15 years, what I'm doing is like, it is a show where anyone comes on. Like, I just want to be the interviewer. And so eventually I do want sports to shed from it. Sports is my number one love. It will always be a part of what I do, but I don't want it to always be the only thing that I do.
Sure. That broaden your reach. And what a gift, by the way, right? To give your gift of asking powerful questions, getting people to open up to the world beyond the NBA. Is there something you wish you knew earlier in your career?
Probably so many things. I don't know if this is the exact answer to your question, but it is something I think about early in my career is I wish I had more space to like make mistakes. And like, I wish I had more space to grow just because, like I said, I've been doing this since I was a lot younger, and it felt like my life moved pretty quickly. And there just were things that I feel like I maybe missed out on. Like, I didn't get to one-man band where I was shooting my own stuff, editing my own stuff, producing my own stuff, doing all of that. And there were skills in that would have been beneficial to me now. Like, I think there are just steps that I kind of feel like I missed that I had to catch up on later. So what I maybe would have told myself when I was younger is like, learn everything. Like, when you get very focused on being in front of the camera, you don't learn that other stuff that actually makes you stronger on camera, that can make you a better interviewer, that can make you a better journalist. So I would say learn everything that you can much earlier.
I think what comes up for me as a former sports agent, it just sounds like you were a first-round draft pick that went straight to the bigs. I mean, you're just a first-rounder. There is no reason to go to the minors. Let's just roll this girl right up to the bigs. I mean, she never has to drive on buses around the country. I mean, let's fly her in.
Oh, trust me, I did that. But
I'm not suggesting you didn't. I'm just saying you were that good that they wanted to let you do what you do so well as fast as possible.
I will say, though, because I think it is so important to say this, and I don't think people say it enough. I have gotten and continue to get so lucky. And luck plays a much larger role in all of our lives than sometimes I think people want to admit. And I don't think luck discounts from hard work. It doesn't discount from just the effort and long nights and everything that I have put into it. But so many things have to align for life to happen. You know, I got lucky that I was at a basketball game that the Big Ten Network was at, that they saw, where they in turn asked me to work for them. I got lucky to be there in that moment. And then you think about all the other things that lead me to even being there. I got lucky enough that I was able to go to college. I got lucky to have advocates, right? So many things happened in life that set me up to do what I'm doing. And I think that when we attribute every good thing that has happened to us to just hard work, we're discounting everybody that works hard, right? There are so many talented people that just didn't get opportunity. Something happened in their lives. They came from circumstances that didn't foster opportunity. And like all of that stuff has to almost make this perfect storm for anybody to be successful. So as much as I know I worked hard and I did all the things, I know that I also got really lucky. And I never want people to feel discouraged if life doesn't go their way, because a lot of the times it wasn't because you didn't work hard enough. It was just because the opportunity came or didn't.
And certainly things lined up for you, but you also obviously are a complete grinder. Right. And
for
you've
sure.
put
Thank
yourself
you. Yeah.
in some, I mean, you're a grinder. I mean, to make it and do what you've done is a grind, and you've grinded it. We make our luck a little bit, I would say, Taylor.
For sure.
Yeah.
Agree with that. I totally do agree with that.
So we end with rapid fire. I'm going to hit you with some quick ones and you just fire back. You ready?
Okay. Yes.
A book that you recommend the most. I've already gotten 3 so far, which I'm digging.
Yeah, no.
Anything else?
Oh my goodness. Yes. There's a book I read called Someone Who Will Love You in All Your Damaged Glory. It's a book of short stories, and it is fantastic. So I think everyone should read that.
Most memorable interview so far?
It was a mini interview, so I don't know if it counts because it was literally like 4 minutes, but it was Barack Obama. So I'm going to say him. Literally, I got to ask him one question. I was like, this is it, but got the video. So I'll say him.
That's outstanding. What's an interview that surprised you the most?
Ooh, good question. He is going to think this is a backhanded compliment, but it isn't. I think that sometimes when we're doing the interviews, we get very caught up in getting like the biggest name, which we think makes it the best interview. But I had Spencer Dinwiddie on my show, plays for the Nets. He's not like some superstar, but he's a good, solid guy and a good player. And he was great. He gave such good insight. He was so open, so honest. And I just think it was a testament to like, it's about the conversation. It's not always about the name. It's one of our most viewed. And, you know, you would think it would be someone else that would be one of the most viewed. But I would say that, Spencer Dinwiddie, that was a surpriser.
Who would you most like to interview that you haven't yet?
Serena Williams.
Girl, you and me both.
I know. I mean, she's on everyone's number one.
I think you got the upper hand on that one.
I mean, I love Serena. I've met her like twice, and I'm just like, I love her. I watch Being Serena, that HBO doc, all the time if I can't sleep. To me, she is just, that is what being great is. That is what I think of when I think of greatness. I don't think of Brady. I don't think of LeBron. Like, I think of Serena Williams. So it would be really cool to interview her.
Ugh, I know you'll make that happen one day. There's no doubt about it.
Fingers crossed. We got to speak it.
Let's go. Let's go. Right. Exactly. So what are you reading right now? So
I just started this, like literally maybe on page 5. I just rewatched The Sopranos. And I was so into it. So I woke up this morning, which is like the oral history of the show. So I'm diving into that just to get some tidbits about the show that I maybe didn't pick up on. So right now I'm doing an oral history of the show.
I mean, I am listening to all these books, and going, where does she find the time? I know you must hear that all the time.
Planes.
Okay.
Planes.
I'm with you on that, girl. You can rock planes. I feel you.
I love
know.
it. And one of my favorite things is like just going to the airport and picking a book and just seeing what they have. So one of my rules on planes, and I love it, I don't turn my phone on. So only Wi-Fi I have is on my computer, and my phone's not connected to my computer at all. So I can work if I need to, but like I can't text or like look at Instagram or anything. I don't care if the flight is 10 hours. I remember we flew to Paris. I did not turn my phone on once. It is just the one time where you don't have that outside aspect of life. So I get reading done and I get a lot of work done on planes. I love going on the plane for that reason.
That is so interesting. I do too. Because all the things that you can get distracted by in life aren't there.
Exactly. And I'm like, everyone should take advantage of like the solitude of a plane.
Totally.
Because that is where you can really do things that you want to do. So, and also when you're in the air all the time, it just gives you something to look forward to.
I plan the time on flights. Is that weird? Like I consider the things that I want to do.
It's not weird at all. I respect it.
I consider the thing, right, to maximize the, whatever it might be, even if it's just, watching Ted Lasso or, anyway. So the show's called Game Changer. So hit me up. Who is a game changer who's inspired you and why?
I mean, honestly, I feel like a game changer is somebody who, like, they create their own game, right? Like, they define that thing. They make their own path. And the reason I say that's a game changer is because they are showing other people what's possible. And to me, that's what a game changer is. I mean, I feel like I'm inspired by so many different game changers all of the time that it would be impossible to name them all. But I think that's what's really cool, about any line of work and about life in general is like the decisions that you make, they don't just impact you, they impact everybody that's watching you, and that's the game. So people that have carved their own path and kind of created their own destiny whenever they do, that's probably how I define it.
I love that definition because at the end of the day, it's about the way that a game changer makes the world a better place and the people in it.
Absolutely, for sure. I do have a question for you. I'm just curious about what do you feel like you get out of doing this that you didn't get out of being an agent?
I loved being an agent. I loved every minute of it. I evolved into the podcast space. It started with speaking. And I found kind of like what you touched on earlier, that being an agent is about getting in front of people who are often really tough to get in front of and getting them to trust you enough to allow you to be their quarterback through such a unique window of time in their life that is so remarkably unique. And it's funny, Taylor, because to me, speaking is so similar. You walk on a stage with thousands of people looking at you going, what do you got? I'm busy. I got a lot of things going on. They've told me to be in this room to listen to this chick. This better be good because I got a lot going on.
Yes.
And
100%.
Right. Or the organizations put you in front of their customers, some of the most important people in their world. And so I take it so seriously. But what I see between speaking and the agent space, and even in this world, it's gaining trust and connection quickly, but in an authentic way that potentially allows, whether it's a room of 1,000 people, whether it was an athlete when I was an agent, or whether conversations like this, that they leave maybe just a little bit better version of the person that stepped in. They learned a little something new. They grew maybe a little bit. They heard something different than they've heard before, and they then can take that out into the world to the people they lead, the people they serve, their families, and just show up a little bit better.
No, I love that. I love that. And I love this. And I will say obviously you are fantastic at this, but in this episode, you absolutely accomplished that because you asked me so many questions that I really had to think about what my answer is. And I don't think often enough questions that we ask people make them think. So I really, really enjoyed learning about myself through all of the things that you asked me. And I'm so thankful that I got to come on and do the show. I truly enjoyed myself.
That means a lot coming from the interview whisperer herself.
No, you are so good. I loved this. I'm like, I'm going to take some of these tips, might ask a few. I'll give you credit.
Here are a few of my favorite takeaways with Taylor. What a sharp young talent. Wow. Number 1, meaningful work isn't measured by accolades and awards. Especially early in your career, it can be so easy to chase the tangible rewards, the promotions, titles, awards. But as you grow, you have to understand what meaningful work looks like for you. And you'll find a much greater reward in that. What is meaningful work to you? What a great question to continue to ask ourselves. Number 2, there's no substitute for genuine curiosity. I think Taylor's got a gift here. She has such a way about her that she can ask these tough questions, but do it so genuinely. It's powerful. And it was evident, right? Talking to Taylor, it's so apparent how she's able to spark such incredible conversations. And it's about curiosity. It's about truly seeing and hearing other people. And that's what connection is, right? Connection is about showing up with genuine curiosity, without judgment, and creating a place in which you can ask great questions and from there create an awesome dialogue. Number 3, confidence is something only you own. The more confident you are, the more things work out for you. Believing you can do it and knowing that you're good is half of it. Confidence is something only you can own. So good. Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. This episode was edited and sound designed by the team at Sound On Studios. You can find out more about their work at soundonsoundoff.com. Check it out. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.